Hello again, everybody. This is Spider Fighter. In this tutorial, I'm going to be talking to you about something that I'm certainly guilty of, and so I feel qualified to discuss it, and that is frame rate. Poor frame rate issues, common pitfalls, and ways to avoid them. Now, certainly frame rate problems can be tracked to different computers, different players' rigs, and it's dependent on different video cards, video RAM, processing speed. All that stuff goes into it. But if you kind of think of it like hiking, if you've ever hiked in a group of people, you only want to hike as fast as the slowest person in that group. And it's the same way when you're designing a mod or a map for a game. You want to make sure that you're designing that so the majority of people can play it and enjoy it rather than the minority. Because what good is pouring all your time and energy into creating this brilliant map if only 10% of players can actually run the thing? So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at some common pitfalls that happen in Grimrock. So I've made this little room. It's got some snails floating around in it and some lighting effects, and when I touch a plate, all these cool fireballs are going to go off. So we're going to take a look at I want you to look at how fast I'm able to move back and forth in this dark hallway. And then, did you see how slow that went? Fast, 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 slow. Slow, and then when we hit this touch plate, now, way slow. You can't tell. Look at the sparks as these things get decimated, as these snails blow up. How slow those fall. So we have a number of things going on in here, a number of problems. First off, we have a huge room. So we're going to try a little something here. We're going to block off most of this room from the player's view. We'll throw some pillars up, and then we'll throw some secret doors. And we'll put these up and see what happens. We've got all these colored lights here, the snails, all the spawners. What happens if we block the player's view from all of this activity? And the answer is nothing. Slows right down just the same. So an empty room filled, or a big room filled with all these walls isn't going to make that big of a difference, even if you're blocking the player's view. And the reason for that, as best as I know, is that the game itself actually draws the room and everything in it immediately afterwards. So even if you've covered up the player's view by partitioning it off, this giant room off with different walls, you're still going to have frame rate issues. Now, having said that, we can turn around here and we can walk into the same size room, which by the way is 9 by 9, and we have no problems at all. That's also because there are no entities in this room. So a giant room by itself is not the kiss of death. But, you know, how boring is this huge room that you're walking through? So that's our first frame rate killer. Not just the giant room, but having everything in it going at once is a problem. Now, one of the reasons why that big room choked so much was because we had all these greater fireballs triggered at the same exact time. So one way to combat that, obviously fewer fireballs at once would be good, but more interesting, set up timers to stagger your spawns. That makes it more interesting and also gives the player an immediate challenge. How do I get through this gauntlet of fireballs without getting hit? Much more interesting than having everything explode at once, and it's a lot easier on their systems, and it'll keep their interest. Another reason why that big room choked was because of all those light entities. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 8 torches in there all running, and more importantly, I've got these 4 special custom asset ceiling lights, which really do take up a lot. So too many light entities in one viewing area will kill your frame rate faster than a knife fight in a phone booth. So shut them off, space them out, set them up with timers to stagger on and off, whatever you want to do. Make the player turn them on or off. But if you got too much going on, you can definitely choke up that frame rate. Another thing that can slow down frame rate, something I'm definitely guilty of as well, too many teleporters in view at one time can cause problems. Now this isn't quite as big of a dramatic difference, but here's my room. And you can see that things slow down a little bit. Now if I were to throw in creatures or more lighting effects, spawn, then things would definitely crawl down. So one way to combat that, well, other than just creating different rooms and having your teleporters in different rooms instead of all in the same room, shut them off. You know, there's no reason that you can have to have them all on at the same time, and this will also help players guess a little bit more. Maybe you could have all of your teleporter rooms chained off with a certain door, or, you know, so that the player suddenly recognizes, oh yeah, that specific door means there's a teleporter behind it. So rather than walking into a room with all these teleporters going off at once, I find that it's more interesting as a player to walk in, maybe hit a button, and suddenly I have a teleporter there that I didn't realize was there. Much more fun to play. And it allows the player to discover things on their own. So to set up something like that, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that teleporter is deactivated at the start. Put on a wall button, connect that to your teleporter. Now we're also going to have a timer because we want that teleporter to shut off on its own, so that you don't have, you know, if you have a large mod, you don't want 100 teleporters all running at once. So we're also going to add a connector from the wall button to the timer. Now, we'll give it a couple seconds for the player to get through. On the timer, you want to add a connector to the teleporter to deactivate it. Alright, so let's check that out. See which wall am I at? Right here. Nothing there. Boom. Go through it. And it shuts off behind you. We could actually make that a little bit longer. Another way to take care of that issue is if you want that teleporter to stay on until the player steps through, then just on the square that you've targeted for the player, you would throw a hidden pressure plate right there, and have that connected to shut off your teleporter behind the player once they teleport. Now the other thing we want to do that can quickly eat up CPU cycles, if you've got dozens and dozens of these timers all running, once these timers start in the game, they keep running until something tells them not to anymore, and that can quickly eat up your CPU cycles. So we want to make it a good habit to, every time you throw a timer on, if you can, if your puzzles and the dungeon allow you to do this, deactivate it. Add a connector to itself and hit deactivate. It's just a good habit to get into, and that's another way that you can help defeat, help keep your frame rate up. So that's a couple of good tips there, I think, to help kill the frame rate demons. Keep your room size down. Try not to have too many entities moving at one time in a viewing area. Try to branch out your teleporters so they're not right on top of each other. And if you've got timers, scripts running in the background that can be shut off, make sure you do that. Ceiling lights, shut them off, turn them on just before the player gets there. If you have cycling lights, find a way to shut them off, or maybe put on a lever that put a lever up on the wall that lets the player control those after they get through that area. So that's it for now, and I will see you in the next tutorial.